Hey everyone, welcome to the last of the 1990s Musing On episodes for albums that came out in 1990. So this is a 1994 one. I've been working my way through by sort of attacking each ends of the 90s, going from sort of 1990 to 1999 backwards and forwards. And so now I've got to the middle. This is the last episode. We're in 94 now, after the previous week, which was I was looking at 1995. So the next episode I'm going to do the same for the 80s. Start at one end, 1980, bounce to 1989, then go back to 1981 and so on, backwards and forwards. And I thought it'd be useful, as always, to just bring up and this is from a sort of through a UK lens, the best-selling albums in the UK for 1994. And you can see, as I think I pointed out in the previous episode, we've got quite a number of greatest hits here, or variations, I suppose, on the greatest hits. Some live stuff as well, which I'd noticed in the previous year. A few of these albums maybe spill over from 93 that were still riding high in the charts. But you've got things like Music Box, which was from 93, Eternal from 93, Division Bell, that was from 94, Monster from 94, Park Life, 94, Steam by E17, also from 94, that was their second album. I can't remember if I bought that or the first one. I think I bought the first one. And things like Ace of Base, Happy Nation, which was from 92, so that was still doing well in the charts. Music for the Jilted Generation. No Need to Argue, the second album, that was also from 94. Actually, let me add that up here. I'd forgotten about that. When did that come out? There we go. Okay, so also these were the albums that were named Albums of the Year for their hits in the charts. So Crazy Sexy Cool, Definitely Maybe, Weezer, Dummy, MTV Unplugged in New York, Dookie, Illmatic, Park Life, Super Unknown, and The Downward Spiral. So as always, I'm just going to talk through the albums that I bought in real time, I suppose, for want of a better word. So as they came out, but I still enjoy it to this day. And then I'll start going through the year as a whole, 94 as a whole, and sort of pick out albums that have subsequently become favourites of mine, or just albums of note. And then also anything like I did just there with the Cranberries album, maybe stuff I've forgotten about. So let's have a look at these ones first of all. So we've got Dookie, I remember getting this when it came out. Initially I bought a copy for my middle brother, and then around the same time I bought a copy for myself. Awesome album. Lots of great tracks on it. Probably the two I really remember are Basket Case and Welcome to Paradise. And then there was this band, Therapy, who I just sort of been made aware of, and there was a track, Nowhere, that was it, and Trigger Inside, those singles. So I bought it around the time of the second single. So this had just come out just before the second single was released. So I picked it up and played it a lot. And I think I might mention, because this band came up in a previous episode, I nearly got to see them in Ireland. I was over there visiting my brother for about a week or so, and there was an opportunity to go and see Gary Moore. He was doing a special show in Dublin to commemorate the unveiling earlier that day or weekend of the Phil Lynott bronze statue. And the tickets were there's still loads of tickets available. It wasn't sold out. So we grabbed some from like a local record store, went up there in the evening. And I didn't realise till several months afterwards that in actual fact Therapy were going to be playing, because I didn't pay a lot of attention to who else was on the bill in terms of knowing before I get there who was playing. I recognised some of the acts once we got there. But there was another band stood in because Therapy had to cancel for some reason. And I can never remember their name. They're the band that did Teenage Dirtbag, and they had a lot of problems setting up for their gig. They were quite delayed. Started playing, but it would have been. It's a shame Therapy didn't play. Would have liked to have seen them. So this, I reckon, is my favourite album from 1994. Bought this when it came out. I remember back then what I used to do quite a bit. So it's funny because compared to the Canada, UK holiday allocation is much more generous. So a lot of times when I started at firms in the UK, you get pretty much 4 weeks off if once you've been there a whole year, pretty close to that. When I came over to Canada, Nova Scotia in 2010, I had a bit of a surprise because the sort of default, holiday, the sort of bare minimum is 2 weeks, and then a lot of firms build out from there. But that was a bit of a shock. So often, when I work for firms in the UK, except for even I suppose when I was working myself, but I'd often have like more holiday than I knew what to do with because I didn't have a lot of disposable income to go anywhere. So when I used to take off time off, either what I would do is try and coincide it with friends' holidays, who I hadn't seen for a while, and we'd sort of hang out over the course of a week, or I'd go do lots of walking on Ashdown Forest, or go out for day trips somewhere. Or another thing I used to do was sit and just listen to music for a week. And I remember at the time, not being able to afford much new music, and I just bought this cassette and I just played it over and over again in the course of a week. So that's why I always remember this album around that. And I think at that point I definitely had some sort of computer console or something, and so I was playing computer games. I bought that when I had a little bit more disposable income. I think it was like a Nintendo actually. But favourite track on the album is David Last Summer. Just so evocative, really reminds me of sort of the end of the holiday in the UK, or the end of the summer, should I say. Both when I was at school, but after that. There's it's very descriptive, as it says here, I think. Where is it? Yeah. Most narrative song delivered entirely in spoken word. And there's a bit in the song where it just takes me back to the tail end of summer holidays. So, particularly like when I was a teenager, the last couple of years at school, and staying out on the forest till the sun had gone down in sort of early September, sort of last couple of weeks before we went back to school, because generally in the UK we'd be off a week in the end of July, the whole of August, and 1 week in September. So you knew it was time to get back to school when the evenings were getting shorter, and it went from being light until about 10 at night, and slowly getting darker and a little bit colder. And just listening to the track just really reminds me of that. And I was just listening to this album this morning actually. I wish I'd got into this band a lot sooner, because they've been kicking around since the mid to early 80s, I think. In fact, let's just check that, because 78, yeah. Yep. First album came out in 83. Wow. I know they were getting played on and off on John Peel, but yeah, I didn't really check them out that much. But yeah, fantastic album if you've never listened to it. In fact, several of the albums I would say there's 3 in particular are real classics here, actually. Yeah, for me. So another one's Park Life. Bought this when it came out. Probably, I listened to Blur on and off. They were getting in the charts quite a bit. Tracks like sort of There's No Other Way, I think, from what I remember, and a few other singles. But it was this track really for me that, you know, bent my ear towards the group, Girls and Boys. And I saw them on the TV, like playing it at some live gig. So classic album, quite a lot of variety on it. And I think it's this track I really like as well, To the End. But yeah, lots of awesome stuff on here. How long is this? 52 minutes. So we very much are getting into that period where albums were getting a bit longer because people were sort of recording for the CD format and not getting quite so worried about whether the stuff would fit on vinyl or not. And also cassettes were never a problem. At this point, I was still buying a lot of cassettes. I hadn't switched over to CDs, so another real favourite of mine. So this also reminds me of holidays. I think I said sometimes what I would do is go up onto the forest, so I'd either go for a walk on the forest, or sometimes if I just wanted to sort of have a nice snooze, I would drive my car up to the top of the forest, up near the place called the Ashdown Forest Centre, and just lean back the seat and just really quietly listen to this in the background, almost like ambient, and then with the birds as well. It's really evocative. And I noticed they're referencing Folktronica here, and they said something about, I did see it earlier while I was sort of putting it in here, where there's an interesting quote, something about, yeah, so definitely an attempt to get, here we go. An album of modern folk songs done in 20th century styles like techno and dub. Yeah. So really interesting listen. Bits of it are not surprisingly pretty laid back, but you got slightly more up-tempo tracks like Urban Clearway and Like a Motorway. Very nice album. And then No Need to Argue, 1994. This was their second album. I think a lot of people know it through the track Zombie. But another one that I played an awful lot and still do enjoy playing. Got a Juno Award for Best Selling Album in 96. I remember when I was at work, a lot of people had the first album. This one. And then this. Actually, if I got the order wrong here, yeah, I moved stuff around a little bit, so really that should be there. Yeah, this album. So, again, trying to sort of fit in memories of, you know, being at this point, so 94, working at Radio Rentals. I'd been there since 93, so it was early. I worked for them for about 4 years, really enjoyed it there. And so 94, I think, would have been my first full year at the firm. And at lunchtimes, I used to go into because it was in the taxi in East Grinstead Town Centre, the office. And you literally used to walk out of the office through a Boots, the pharmacy, and then you'd be out on the main high street in East Grinstead. And I remember walking into Smith's, which had albums, but it was actually in the magazine section. And because I hung out quite a bit in East Grinstead, I lived out in a place called Forest Row, for quite a long time when I was in the UK, since I was born actually, so it's not far away from East Grinstead, but we used to go up to East Grinstead quite a bit in the evenings and hang out at all different places. And there was a place called the 101 Club, which was a nightclub that was over the top of a pub, and they had a lot of bands there. Did I say nightclub? I meant to say live venue, sorry. A lot had bands there, and I used to go to the 101 Club and then the Shelley Arms in Nutley, which is a friend of mine at the time owned, and then or ran on behalf of his dad, and then a few other places where we'd see. And so I often recognise a lot of people locally, but I didn't really know them to speak to. And I can remember there was somebody in there with a friend of theirs who, again, I didn't really know them to speak to, but recognise them from watching bands. And they're in there with a friend, and they were getting really excited about the release of the Prodigy album. It was on the cover of one of these magazines, and I could tell them they were sort of, getting very animated with their friends, saying, "Oh yeah, I'm really looking forward to this album coming out." So I thought, well, he seems pretty animated, and I knew stuff off the experience. I knew Charlie, so I thought, well, I better check the album out. And I wasn't disappointed. And then after I got it, we went and did some work at one of the Radio Rentals offices, helping out for a couple of days, a load of us. And so we, this sort of expenses paid trip. We went up, stayed in a hotel, food for a couple of days, and then came back, and all the cars were sort of like, we had a hire car. And I remember taking this up and my cassette player and listening to this late at night in the hotel room. It's cool. Yeah. Music for the Jilted Generation. What's that track on there I really like? Intro into Break and Enter, that's it. It's pretty long as well, 78 minutes. Yeah, so definitely moving into a world of CDs, but had this on cassette. So let's look at the year as a whole, see what else we can pick up that I may have forgotten about, in terms of, I did actually buy at the time and then forgot that I bought it at the time, and it is a personal favourite. I think I've done a pretty good job here. This is interesting, Jar of Flies, and in the UK that actually got released as a double thing with SAP, and I had it on a double cassette. And I remember really liking it at the time, but I don't know why. I didn't really stand the test of time. I didn't listen to it much beyond the first year it came out. But yeah, I did have that on double cassette. Cross Purposes by Black Sabbath. Didn't buy that till years later. Yeah. So that was the one after Ronnie James Dio had come back. So yeah. So Ronnie James Dio comes back to Sabbath for one album, and then Tony Martin, who'd previously been in Black Sabbath for a little while as a vocalist, comes back after that. And I bought all the Sabbath albums up to, 13 hadn't been released then, but I never bought it. But I ended up, over the course of a year, I think, towards the end of the 2000s, buying these odd ones on CD, and that rather nice box set that you saw in a previous My Life in Objects video. There's Dookie, which we already spoke about. Trouble Gone by Therapy. Oh, this album, I didn't know about this until the 2010s, when I was sort of researching post-rock. So this is an early post-rock album. Yeah, this is the one that was where the term post-rock was coined by Simon Reynolds in an article. Now, there are examples of post-rock albums before this that people cite retrospectively, like, the very last album by Talk Talk. But yeah, I went back and listened to this, just a few years ago. Transylvanian Hunger by Dark Throne, another one that looks like it's been fed through a photocopier. I think it did, actually. I think there's a joke around that they sent an example of the artwork by fax. And so the apocryphal story goes that The record label that they were on at the time, which would have been Peaceville, mistakenly used it as the album cover. That's the story. Whether or not it's true, I don't know. In the Nightside Eclipse by Emperor, I remember seeing that album when I went down to Brighton, because I was trying to think, like, of these albums I've got here, I think all of these were bought locally in East Grinstead, and I wasn't going down to Brighton quite so much because I didn't have quite so much disposable income, so I couldn't really afford to drive down too regularly to the coast, just for petrol expenses. But I remember going in one day and seeing the remnants of their cassette wall, which is getting smaller and smaller and smaller. Sometime in the 90s, I'm not sure when it was, and they had a copy of the Nightside Eclipse on it, because I remember the artwork, which is this. And I'm thinking, I wonder who that band are. And I didn't really know much about them until the late 90s. Same with this album, Principle of Evil Made Flesh by Cradle of Filth. I have that on CD now, but I wasn't aware of the band in 94. It wasn't until late 90s. Well, actually, 97. Because I picked up Dusk and Her Embrace. I think I have this album, but again, bought retrospectively. There's probably quite a bit of metal here that I bought retrospectively because I hadn't quite got back onto the metal wagon, and also didn't have a lot of spare cash. I did have this and listened to it quite a bit, Walking on the Forest. It's a pretty dark album. But trouble is I don't remember much of the tracks nowadays, so I wouldn't put it up with this lot. Devil Hopping by in Spiral Carpets, I remember that. Far Beyond Driven. I did buy the album, but I didn't listen to it that much, to be honest with you. Promenade by the Divine Comedy. Yeah, I didn't buy anything by them. So we got the debut by In Flames. So it is an interesting year, 94, for extreme music. There was quite a few, number of important debut albums out that year in various genres. There's His and Hers by Pulp, Anarchy by Chumbawamba, Park Life by Blur. We've already mentioned that. Yeah, I can't remember. I've only ever listened to one Smithereens track, and I just cannot remember what the name of the album is. What the name of the track is. No, I didn't buy that. I'd sort of lost track a bit of Yingwei by this time. Oh, the Weezer album. I did buy that quite a number of years later, but not at the time. I don't think. Did I have that on cassette? Not sure, but I know it was quite a bit later. This I bought quite a bit later as well. This is a good album, Life Forms by Future Sound of London. It has gone on to be a real favourite of mine, and when I bought it, I used to put it on. It was a good Sunday afternoon album, very mellow, but if I'm being honest, I didn't buy this in 94, so can't really make the list up here. The Mysterious Don Thanatos by Mayhem came out that year. Fear, Emptiness, Despair by Napalm Death. Pause to Picasso by Bruce Dickinson. Oh, Purple by Stone Temple Pilots. No, I don't have that. I think I have the previous one. Split by Lush, which was their second studio album. I didn't buy much of their stuff beyond Spooky, which I mentioned in another episode about the 90s. Betty by Helmet. Was that the third album? I didn't really listen to them until quite recently. They're sort of interesting missing link in the extreme music chain, I think. There's a number of bands, like alternative metal bands, that I just didn't listen to at the time. I've got this even though I went back and retrospectively listened to a lot of bands in the 90s, some areas of music, there's still a huge hole. Welcome to Sky Valley. Now that was the third album. Yeah, I'm so sad I missed out on them at the time. By the time I listened to them, they'd already disbanded. And I don't know, there's something about getting into a band at the time they're out. There's something quite special about that, like discovering a band on their first album as it's coming out, and then getting excited about the releases. So I only discovered them through other desert rock bands and stuff like that. So that must be the first Downset album. What was the album I know by them? Do we speak a dead language? I think, and that's the first one I would have bought, but not until the late 90s. This is a pretty famous album, Tales from the Thousand Lakes. Yeah, I do have a copy of it, but it was bought in the 2000s. Oh, which album by this at the Gates? Third album. Like I said, I didn't get into them until Slaughter of the Soul, and that was after another band after they'd disbanded. Yes, it's a common story for 90s, that's early to mid 90s metal. Like Burn My Eyes by Machine Head, same sort of thing. This is a funny one. Now, this is one of my all-time favourite albums, but I put off buying this by about a year or so because it was just so expensive at the time. I never saw it reduced. It was always full price, and so because I didn't have much cash, stuff like that factors in. Yeah, it was always full price. So I bought the cassette eventually, but not until the late 90s probably. But it is they're one of my favourite bands. I was quite gutted. There's so much good stuff on that album. Okay. That's a good album. Yeah, another band that I need to check out a bit more. Dinosaur Jr. Baby by Shed 7. Yeah. 94. You can see we've got, Blur, Oasis, and bands like Shed 7 around that time. Yeah, they were one of the groups that contributed to the Britpop music scene of the 1990s. So yeah, 94 was a pretty good year for hearing Britpop on the radio, because of some of the major releases that year. Love and Rockets. So that's what's the name of the guys? Yeah, Daniel Ash, David J, and Kevin Haskins. So 3 out of 4 of Bauhaus. Protection. What was that? Second album. That's got, which is the track? Protection Karma Code. I do have this, but I didn't buy it until a lot later. I wasn't really keeping up too well with them, despite buying the Blue Lines pretty early on, same year it came out, and being one of my favourites. Yeah, I was going to listen to this again, but I didn't get a chance. So I remember buying it when it came out. I did buy it when it came out, but I didn't really keep listening to it that much. Don't think I owned that. I wasn't keeping up too well with Corrosion of Conformity. I have sort of odd albums here and there. There's no need to argue. What's this? This is the third album. Yeah, it's in Images and Words that I know. I don't really know this one very well. Dream Theater were another band that I didn't really, I was aware of them being there, but I just didn't get into until a lot later. Dogman Star, what's that second album? Yeah, Suede again. I didn't really lock into them too much. But I have this album now. It was bought a number of years later. First and the second albums I bought on CD. Debut Korn album. Yeah, I didn't buy that until the late 90s after I'd got Life is Peachy. Scratch the Surface. I have this, but I just don't remember when I bought it. I didn't buy it when it came out because I have it on CD, so, and I wasn't buying CDs till later in the 90s. But I do have that. Tears Laid in Earth, debut album. Didn't get into them until quite later. They're well worth checking out. If you've never checked out Third and Immortal, very interesting band. So yeah, very doomy at this point, but then they expanded out. Towards the Within, which is a live Dead Can Dance album. Going. Oh, Euthanasia by Megadeth. I had a friend that I used to work with at Radio Renters who's big into Megadeth. And we went to quite a few gigs in the early 2000s. And yeah, we did go and see Megadeth, but a later version of the band after Marty Friedman had left. In fact, I think I have a copy of this. They gifted me a few years later. Aerosmith, Cryptopsy, Blasphemy Made Flesh. Frostbite Enslaved, bought that a number of years later. For All Tid by Dimmy Borgia. Second Coming by the Stone Roses. Yeah, that was definitely a long time coming, that one. I did buy it when it came out. It's nice and spirally riffing on it. In fact, I might have mentioned this one in the 95 episode actually, because it probably came up as being released in the US that year, so I've got a little bit muddled up. Pandemonium by Killing Joke. Yeah, I had a CD single for that, but didn't buy the album at the time. Right, let's just check through here and anything I missed that I may have bought that year, which is unlikely. Loads of Cathedral EPs actually. I didn't get into them until a bit later. Is that the first Electric Wizard album? I think it is. Yeah, I was checking that out at the weekend actually. I'd never listened to it. I've got some of their stuff. And most of their stuff I'd listened to off of Spotify. I did buy one of their albums, or pretty much when it came out. But yeah, this is super. It's a really good album actually. It's got quite a gnarly sound to it. Yeah. It's doom, but yeah, it's quite a interesting guitar sound on there, I think. Oh, what's that? Is that their debut album? I've never listened to that. What was Godfish up to then? Third album, yeah. So much of their stuff I've never listened to. Hypocrisy, The Fourth Dimension. Now, the guy that's behind Hypocrisy is a pretty big producer, isn't he? Yeah. I keep meaning to check them out. I never got around to it. Oh, Tony McAlpine, what was he up to by then? Premonition. I had one of his albums on cassette. And the Bloody Earth EP. I think I have that. I might have one of their EPs. I know I have all their early albums up to. What was it? Yeah, I bought quite a lot of their stuff actually. trying to think of the track on there. Yeah, it's gone now. Anyway, I've got a lot of their stuff on CD, but it's mainly albums. Before One by Pentagram, third album. I have one Pentagram album, but I think it was one that was released way after the fact. Oh, Ceremony of Opposites by Samuel. I don't know if I have that or not, but it would have been bought way after the fact. I didn't discover them until 2000s. Wow. Yeah. Okay, highest grossing films through the lens of the UK. Four Weddings and a Funeral, Mrs. Doubtfire, The Flintstones, The Lion King, The Mask, Aladdin, Schindler's List, True Lies, Forrest Gump and Speed. Out of that list, I possibly saw Speed and True Lies at the cinema, but I think that's all I can remember. If I look at the number one films in the UK week by week, Tombstone, I think I saw that on video. I think I'd mentioned I can't remember where the rental shop was, whether there was still one in Forest Row or we had to go up to East Grinstead, but I was still renting videos now and again. Plus I think in 94, I had a friend who'd been away to university and they'd gone back and went to work for another pharmaceutical firm, which is how I first met them, when they were working for the firm I worked previously before Radio Rentals, and we were sort of still hanging out now and again and used to watch videos and stuff, so some of these I might have watched with them. Lion King. Highlander 3, The Sorcerer. I don't think I've ever watched that. I've watched the first two. I really liked the first one. Okay, US Lens, Forrest Gump, Lion King, True Lies, The Santa Claus, Flintstones, Dumb and Dumber, Clear and Present Danger, Speed, The Mask, and Pulp Fiction, which I saw years later. Let's just look at the number one films in the US over the course of the year. Ace Ventura, Pet Detective. I think a lot of these also these other ones I've seen after the fact. I've never really watched that all the way through. Four Weddings and a Funeral. So the reason I just looked at, we have a cat called Mav. Originally he was called Maverick. We just call him Maven now, or Mav. Well, Mav basically. And he's a ex-shelter cat. He was in a couple of shelters for quite a while. He's a lovely cat. I don't know why he's 3 now. He's a lovely cat. Anyway, his original name was in the shelter was Puddy. I think Puddy Tat, because he looks a little bit like Sylvester. He's a tuxedo cat. He's like quite fluffy. He looks like he's got some sort of fluffy, fluffy breed in him, like a long head. You may have heard him a couple of times on microphone. He's a little bit yowly, but in a sweet way. Oh, excuse my tummy. It's time for lunch, I think. Yeah, so there we have it. Oh, Stargate. Right, yeah, that came out that year, didn't it? I saw that at the cinema. I actually watched that recently. For some reason, I was signed up for Amazon Prime for a little time. I think I just leveraged when they did a month for free, whatever. And I went in and watched Stargate. Oh, maybe I watched it. It might even be on Tubby actually for free. Yeah, maybe I saw it on there. But I watched it again for the first time in probably decades. I still really enjoy it. Yeah, still really enjoy it. Wow. So there we have it. Hopefully you've enjoyed my overall yomp through 94. I know these, Musing on Albums episodes, a bit hit and miss sometimes in terms of popularity. Like I remember the first one I did quite well, relatively speaking. So I think it's just down to what people like and stuff like that. But I certainly have really enjoyed them. If you have enjoyed them yourself, do you want to just comment in the comments section so I know, particularly which years you enjoyed most, like what are favourite years, also what are favourite years of yours from 1980 or the 2000s, because where I'm going with this is ultimately I'm going to do those 3 decades, and the reason why I'm stopping at 2000 is because after that's when streaming really came online. So it really sort of nerves me doing this. This is an album I bought when it came out sort of thing. So I can't really do that. But I was buying albums consistently or relatively consistently from about 1980 through to the end of the 2000s. 2009's a little bit slim pickings, but there's enough there to be able to talk about it. So, yeah. So the next episode I'm going to do should be 1980. In fact, I've already planned it, but I'm not going to do a spoiler. I've already got all the tabs sorted out. Thanks once again for watching. Bye for now, and I will catch you in a future episode.